Millionaire let Mistress name his baby. Pregnant wife took legal control overnight. In the glittering world of high society, where secrets hide behind designer suits and sparkling champagne, one scandal stands out like a flaming torch in a dark alley. Charles Beaumont III, a self-made millionaire respected by CEOs and revered by social climbers, carried a hidden burden. A mistress pregnant with his child and a devoted wife who was also expecting. The stunning twist? He let his mistress pick the baby's name. No one imagined that this single decision would unleash a storm of betrayals, power grabs, and life-altering consequences. But when his pregnant wife took charge overnight, everything he built threatened to collapse. Charles Beaumont III was born into a modest family in upstate New York. His parents, Irene and Henry Beaumont, ran a small hardware store on the outskirts of their sleepy town. Charles saw from a young age how daily struggles gripped families who lived paycheck to paycheck. Determined to carve a new path, he threw himself into his studies, graduating top of his high school class. From there, he landed a scholarship to Cornell University, his ticket out of small-town living and toward greatness. During his freshman year at Cornell, Charles met the woman who would eventually become his wife, Juliana Thompson. Juliana, tall and regal with a sharp intellect, was Charles's equal in every way. She came from a well-off family in Connecticut, but had a quiet fire that burned for success on her own terms. Their early courtship brimmed with optimism. Picnic lunches by the campus lake, coffee-fueled all-nighters in the library, and sweet promises shared beneath ivy-covered arches. They dreamed of conquering the business world together, combining his hunger for entrepreneurial triumph with her refined sense of diplomacy and strategy. After graduating, Charles wasted no time founding Beaumont Innovations, a consulting firm focused on technology integration for corporate giants. The venture soared beyond his wildest hopes, and the couple married soon after. They moved into a spacious penthouse in Manhattan, capturing the epitome of upward mobility. Before long, tabloids declared them the power couple of the East Coast, though they generally avoided the limelight. But beneath the public facade of their enviable life, hints of tension simmered. Juliana, once deeply involved in the day-to-day operations of Beaumont Innovations, stepped away to pursue philanthropic endeavors. She yearned to support women in STEM fields, fund scholarships, and give back to the Ivy League system that had granted them both so many opportunities. Meanwhile, Charles became consumed by his ambitions, working 12-hour days, 6 days a week. He chaired board meetings, offered keynote addresses at major summits, and rubbed shoulders with celebrity CEOs like Elon Musk and Richard Branson at private tech gatherings. When they discovered Juliana was pregnant after 6 years of marriage, Charles was overjoyed. Though the weight of fatherhood stirred new insecurities, he worried whether he could meet both the demands of his company and the needs of a new baby. Still, he promised Juliana he would ease his schedule and be there for every doctor's appointment. For a brief moment, the vision of their perfect life seemed poised to crystallize. A healthy child, a thriving business, and philanthropic legacies. Yet, as the old saying goes, a man's pride can be his downfall. Behind the scenes, Charles had initiated a secret affair. The taboo liaison began at a lavish charity gala in Beverly Hills, where he crossed paths with a captivating socialite named Vanessa Moretti. With honey-brown eyes and a voice as smooth as velvet, Vanessa matched Charles's intensity and reckless pursuit of thrills. One dance turned into drinks. Drinks led to confidences. Before he realized it, Charles found himself entangled in an affair he swore was a momentary lapse, a fleeting indulgence in excitement. But the affair refused to remain in the shadows. 2 months into his wife's pregnancy, Charles learned Vanessa was also expecting. Panic clutched his chest. He offered financial support and pledged total secrecy. Vanessa, on the other hand, had bigger dreams than hush money. She saw an opportunity for leverage and, in time, a permanent upgrade to her social standing. Charles, naive with guilt, led her into corners of his life that he once protected fiercely. Thus began the unraveling of the perfect life that Charles and Juliana had so carefully cultivated. And the worst part? Charles had no idea how quickly his string of lies would spiral out of control. The first months of Vanessa's pregnancy felt like a balancing act for Charles. He ensured that Juliana knew nothing. His phone was guarded with new passcodes, untraceable texts, and short calls taken during his work breaks. Yet Vanessa's demands grew bolder by the day. She insisted Charles meet her in pricey restaurants or exclusive clubs, places she deliberately chose for their potential to attract paparazzi. Though she never admitted it outright, she adored the thrill of nearly being caught. Charles was aware he was playing with fire. A single picture, a careless comment on social media, or a rumor in the society pages could expose him. But vanity and guilt played equal roles. He felt obligated to keep Vanessa content. She had threatened more than once to spice things up if she didn't feel properly valued. Charles saw the unspoken vow in her eyes. She would not go quietly if he sidelined her. By the time both women hit their second trimester, the tension grew impossible to ignore. Vanessa demanded that Charles let her pick the baby's name, wanting to mark her territory. Initially, Charles refused. What father would surrender such a meaningful right, especially to a mistress? But Vanessa had a trump card. Through various slip-ups, like sharing phone pictures and letting her see corporate emails, Charles had inadvertently allowed her a glimpse of sensitive deals at Beaumont Innovations. If she went public with certain insider knowledge, she could spark investigations into his company. The brand damage alone would be astronomical. Cornered, Charles foolishly agreed. He negotiated a compromise. He would let Vanessa name the child if she swore not to publicize the affair, at least until his legitimate child with Juliana was born and the dust had settled. It was a twisted arrangement, but he felt it was the only choice that wouldn't destroy his life in an instant. Vanessa, elated, took the naming privilege as proof that Charles valued her. She embarked on a spree of baby name research, scanning everything from Italian aristocratic lineages to Bollywood film credits. She sent Charles daily text messages with bizarre name suggestions ranging from Apollo to Xander to Magnus. He dreaded each message. For him, these texts were stinging reminders of the impending catastrophe. Meanwhile, Juliana noticed Charles's unusual anxiety. As her belly grew, so did her longing for emotional closeness. She tried to engage him in baby preparations, shopping for cribs, comparing strollers, selecting paint colors for the nursery. Every time, he seemed distracted and restless, often claiming the stress of finalizing a major international acquisition. Juliana, typically independent and trusting, decided to be patient. But she also sensed a dark undercurrent that she couldn't yet name. When Juliana's best friend, Hannah Conway, visited one afternoon, she sensed the distance between the couple. Hannah, a keen observer, had always looked out for Juliana's well-being. Over a cup of chamomile tea in the living room, she asked her friend if Charles was truly as busy as he claimed. Juliana brushed it off, insisting that the firm's expansion was the reason for his stress. Yet Hannah's eyes narrowed. She quietly offered her support if anything fell off. Juliana's soft smile of gratitude betrayed her own doubts. As Charles's double life continued, Vanessa refused to stay quiet. She wanted more. A promise of a luxurious apartment in the Upper East Side, a position with Beaumont Innovations, or direct financial backing for her pet fashion line. She saw herself not as a secret fling, but as someone entitled to Charles's wealth. When Charles resisted, she insinuated that naming the baby wasn't enough. She wanted a seat at the table. She wanted recognition, or else. Charles, pressured from all sides, made desperate promises he hoped never to fulfill. He allocated hush funds through obscure channels to keep Vanessa's lifestyle lavish. He told her he'd consider bringing her on as a consultant for his firm's philanthropic events. The avalanche of deceit kept piling, with Charles foolishly thinking he could outrun the truth. Eventually, the day arrived when Vanessa texted him the name she had finally decided on for their unborn son. The message read, "I want to name him Ansel Giovanni Beaumont." Charles felt his stomach lurch. The name was undeniably aristocratic, even pretentious, but his apprehension was less about style and more about the gravity of letting his mistress brand his child. He typed back, "All right, just keep your promise." His concession would set off a chain of events that would upend every facet of his life. The next few weeks were a whirlwind of PR events for Beaumont Innovations. Charles was pushing for a critical merger with a major European cybersecurity firm, a deal that would elevate his company into a powerhouse commanding global influence. Many believe this move was the stepping stone toward him becoming the youngest billionaire tech mogul in Manhattan. Juliana, on doctor's advice, scaled back her philanthropic outings as her own due date inched closer. She spent more time at home, occasionally attending only the most crucial fundraisers. Her once busy calendar became quieter, giving her ample opportunity to reflect. She grew increasingly suspicious about Charles's absences. He claimed business meetings, but his explanations lacked the usual detail. She knew her husband's routines, recognized the subtle quirks in his voice when he told half-truths. Something wasn't right. At a gala for the Women in Technology Foundation, which Juliana was co-chairing, she ran into an acquaintance named Serena Caldwell, a high-society gossip who thrived on collecting scraps of scandal. Over dessert, Serena dropped a tantalizing hint about someone's big-shot husband stepping out with a certain socialite. Juliana forced a polite smile, but inside, alarm bells rang. She pressed for more details, but Serena was frustratingly vague, only grinning like a cat that just swallowed a canary. Juliana returned to the penthouse that evening, determined to keep her composure. Charles was in his office, dealing with a pressing situation. She could hear the muffled sound of him pacing and talking on the phone. In a moment of impulse, Juliana tiptoed to the office door, pressing her ear to it. She caught fragments of the conversation. "That told you I won't let it go public." "No, absolutely not. Just hold off until after." "Yes, I remember the promise, Vanessa." Juliana froze. The mention of Vanessa cut through her heart like a blade. She stepped away, breathing hard. She returned to the living room, her mind whirling with possibilities. Her instincts told her that Charles was having an affair, yet she wasn't ready to confront him without more concrete proof. Meanwhile, Vanessa wasn't idle. She had begun dropping subtle hints on her social media, posting cryptic messages about big things coming and finally getting the recognition I deserve. Friends and followers speculated she was launching a fashion line or scoring a role in a reality show. None suspected she was pregnant with a secret child of one of the city's most prominent businessmen. In a twist that only fueled the flames, Hannah Conway decided to do some digging of her own. Concerned for Juliana, she started discreetly asking mutual friends if anyone had seen Charles in unusual company. Hannah managed to track down a paparazzo acquaintance who mentioned snapping photos of Charles with a mystery brunette near a private club. The paparazzo wanted to sell the pictures to the highest bidder, though he had not recognized the woman or connected it back to Charles's name. Armed with this tip, Hannah approached Juliana, showing her grainy images on a phone. They were blurred but unmistakable. Charles in a navy suit, leaning intimately toward a woman outside a black SUV. Juliana's face went pale. Before she could break down, she steadied herself, a fierce determination rising inside her. She wasn't about to let Charles humiliate her or damage their unborn child's future. Juliana's attorney father, the late Robert Thompson, had drilled into her the importance of legal safeguards. She recalled her father's stories about protecting family estates from scandal and how the law, when used wisely, could become a powerful weapon. If Charles was betraying her, she had to plan her next step carefully. That night, Juliana took notes on everything she could recall. Unusual meetings, suspicious phone calls, the mysterious name Vanessa. She scoured bank statements, noticing strange transfers from the company's discretionary accounts. They were relatively small amounts in the grand scheme of Charles's wealth, but frequent enough to raise eyebrows. She made copies, storing them on an encrypted flash drive. She swore Hannah to secrecy. Juliana needed time to piece everything together, to see if Charles was truly deep in an affair and if the rumor about a pregnant mistress was more than just hearsay. As each day passed, she felt her child move within her, reminding her of the stakes. She wasn't just fighting for her pride. She was fighting for her baby's future as well. Charles found himself walking on shards of glass each time he stepped into the penthouse. Juliana's warmth had cooled, her eyes often distant. He sensed she was on the cusp of learning everything, yet hoped it was merely his paranoia. On the business side, the tension was equally high. Negotiations with the European cybersecurity firm were stalling, and rumor had it that the competitor, Caldwell Tech, was ready to swoop in if Charles couldn't close. One evening, 2 weeks before Juliana's due date, she made an unannounced visit to Beaumont Innovations. Under the guise of delivering homemade treats for the staff, Juliana strolled into Charles's executive suite. His assistant, Clarence Moore, a loyal gatekeeper, tried to stall her, but she breezed past with an air of authority. She found Charles in a tense phone conversation. As soon as she entered, he abruptly ended the call, looking unsettled. Juliana calmly placed a box of pastries on the coffee table, then turned to him with a piercing gaze. "Charles," she began, voice steady, "there's something we need to discuss, and I expect total honesty." Charles's mind raced. He could see no point in lying if she already knew, but a part of him clung to the last shred of denial. "Of course," he said, forcing a smile. Juliana retrieved her phone and opened the paparazzo's blurred photos. "Do you recognize this woman?" Charles's mask cracked for a second, just enough for Juliana to notice. The fear in his eyes confirmed her worst suspicions. She pressed on. "I heard you mention the name Vanessa on the phone. She's your mistress, isn't she?" He opened his mouth, but words failed him. Juliana clenched her fists, her voice trembling with controlled rage. "I trusted you. We built this empire together. We're about to have our first child, and you're out there doing this." Charles mumbled half-hearted explanations. He blamed stress, the demands of the business, and Vanessa's cunning manipulations. Juliana listened coldly, but the moment he confessed, "She's pregnant," her world blurred in red. She steadied herself against a chair to avoid fainting. The final confirmation of a child was more than she could bear. In the heated argument that followed, Charles tried to rationalize. He swore he never intended to hurt Juliana, that he was trapped by Vanessa's threats. He voiced regret, insisted he would handle it. But Juliana couldn't unhear the betrayal. She locked eyes with him. "Don't touch me," she warned when he tried to comfort her. "You promised me a life of respect and partnership, and this is how you repay me." Tears welled in her eyes, but she refused to crumble. Gathering her composure, she reached into her purse and pulled out a folder. "I've consulted my attorneys. I know about the hush money, about the suspicious accounts. If you think for 1 second I'll let you or that woman endanger my child's future, you're mistaken." Charles swallowed hard. He had never seen Juliana so resolute, so distant, as if she were already moving beyond him. Fear coiled in his belly, more frightening than any corporate takeover. He realized he had underestimated his wife's capability for strategy. She was, after all, the daughter of a seasoned attorney who specialized in protecting estates from scandal. Before leaving, Juliana delivered a final blow. "We'll discuss the terms. I'm not making any decisions until the baby is born. But know this, Charles. If you think you've seen me at my sharpest, you're wrong. You have no idea what I'm capable of when protecting my child." She turned and strode out, leaving Charles alone with the realization that his life was on the brink of ruin. He slumped into his chair, staring at his phone as if it were a ticking bomb. He wanted to call Vanessa, to lash out at her for dragging him into this. But deep down, he knew he was the architect of his own downfall. Vanessa Moretti, meanwhile, reveled in her illusions of grandeur. She posted baby bump pictures on anonymous Instagram accounts, each time cropping out Charles's face. She cooed to her social circle about her unborn son, Ansel Giovanni Beaumont, as if she were already an anointed Beaumont matriarch. She believed she held all the cards. Little did she suspect that Juliana, quiet and calculating, was readying a legal net to capture them both. After the confrontation at Beaumont Innovations, Juliana hired a private investigator named Gabriel Chun. He was discreet, efficient, and known for unearthing damaging secrets that unsuspecting individuals had buried. She handed him a few leads: phone numbers, Vanessa's rumored address, and a partial list of her known associates. Gabriel began his pursuit. Within days, he provided Juliana with a dossier containing Vanessa's real financial history. Mountains of credit card debt, a history of latching onto wealthy men, and a scandal involving a European prince that ended with hush money and deportation threats. It was a dark portrait of a professional gold digger who had elevated her game with each new conquest. Yet the truly explosive details lay in Vanessa's communications. Gabriel had intercepted messages that revealed Vanessa was already in contact with a tabloid journalist at Society Insider. She planned to leak the story of her affair with Charles, complete with partial pictures and sensationalized accounts, right around the birth of both babies, guaranteeing maximum publicity and, presumably, a financial windfall. The revelations made Juliana's blood boil, but they also gave her a strategic advantage. Fearing that any direct confrontation might jeopardize her health or the baby, Juliana instead channeled her anger into swift legal action. She had her father's former colleagues draft airtight confidentiality agreements and property claim restraining orders. If Vanessa tried to make a public spectacle, she would face lawsuits that could bankrupt her. Juliana even considered seeking a restraining order to keep Vanessa away from Charles and the unborn child. However, her legal advisors suggested waiting until after her own child's birth. Public sympathy would side with the new mother if the scandal broke. Meanwhile, Charles found himself torn. He resented Vanessa for cornering him into naming rights for her tabloid ambitions. Yet he still felt compelled to protect her from Juliana's wrath. Guilty over the entire situation, he attempted multiple times to persuade Vanessa to hold off on contacting the press, offering more hush money. She smugly refused, confident in her leverage. In a twist of events, the real estate mogul Gregory Lynn, an old friend of Juliana's father, approached her with an offer, an ownership stake in a prime piece of Manhattan property, which she could leverage as a potential trade in the upcoming divorce negotiations. Juliana realized that if she controlled more high-value assets, she could negotiate from a position of overwhelming strength. She accepted the offer, intending to keep it discreet until the right moment. Charles remained oblivious to these maneuvers, too busy scrambling to keep Vanessa satisfied and his business afloat. On a crisp morning, just a week before Juliana's due date, everything came to a head. Vanessa called Charles in a rage, accusing him of betraying her. She claimed she had caught wind that Juliana was planning to sue her into oblivion the moment the baby was born. She demanded Charles intervene, threatened to go public immediately. Charles, at his breaking point, stormed out of his office and headed to Vanessa's apartment to calm her down. What he found was a hysterical Vanessa ranting about how she deserved a place in the Beaumont legacy. On her coffee table sat a disturbing sight. A stack of tabloid magazines, photos of Charles cut out and taped next to pictures of her pregnant belly. It was like a shrine to their scandal. Charles realized she wasn't just after the money. She wanted fame, a permanent mark that she was part of the Beaumont story. Desperate, he promised her more financial security, guaranteed her a future role in Beaumont Innovations if she would just lay low. Vanessa eyed him skeptically, sensing his fear. She demanded something more concrete, a written promise or a legal document. Otherwise, she threatened to hand over everything to Society Insider by the end of the day. Charles, out of options, agreed to put it in writing, a step he knew would further incriminate him, but he prayed it would buy him time. Vanessa smiled, a satisfied viper. She believed her victory was near. Yet somewhere across Manhattan, Juliana Beaumont was finalizing the last details of her own gambit. All she needed was the perfect timing to strike, and that moment was arriving sooner than anyone guessed. Juliana went into labor 2 weeks ahead of schedule, catching everyone off guard. Early in the morning, she woke to sharp pains and knew it was time. Charles, jolted from sleep, scrambled to grab the hospital bag, while Hannah arrived within the hour to help. The flurry of excitement momentarily pushed all tensions aside. At the hospital, Juliana was prepped for delivery. Despite her emotional turmoil, she was laser-focused on the arrival of her baby. Charles paced the halls, anxiety gripping him. Every beep of the medical monitor made his heart pound. He felt a fleeting surge of gratitude, reminding himself that he was about to become a father in a legitimate sense. All the corporate deals and hush money seemed insignificant next to the miracle of new life. But he also felt dread, knowing that once Juliana gave birth, her threat to legally dismantle him would grow even more formidable. After hours of labor, Juliana delivered a healthy baby boy. The moment he let out his first wail, tears streamed down her cheeks. She held him close, marveling at the tiny hands and the wild tuft of dark hair. For an instant, she considered letting everything else go, focusing only on this pure love she felt. But when she spotted Charles standing by the doorway, his eyes brimming with guilt and relief, her resolve reignited. "I want to name him Robert Henry Beaumont," she said softly, honoring her father and father-in-law. Charles nodded, touched by the tribute. Yet behind that fleeting moment of familial unity, he was painfully aware that the name Ansel Giovanni Beaumont was waiting to be assigned to another newborn soon enough. 2 days later, Juliana and the baby were cleared to go home. Nurses and doctors offered congratulations, praising the healthy birth. Charles made a show of gratitude, but inside, he was bracing for Vanessa's next move. Sure enough, the moment Juliana and Charles stepped into the penthouse, Charles's phone buzzed. A text from Vanessa: "I'm in labor. Hospital is Mantisai. Get here now." Juliana noticed the message, reading it over Charles's shoulder. Without missing a beat, she turned her gaze to him. "Go," she said icily, her voice drained of emotion. "You wanted this. Now deal with it." In a daze, Charles grabbed his coat and hurried out. Juliana gently cradled her newborn, her eyes glistening with tears of heartbreak, of rage, of the unimaginable betrayal she now fully grasped. Within minutes of Charles leaving, Hannah arrived as if sensing Juliana's emotional earthquake. She helped with the baby, offering moral support. Then, Juliana made a decisive phone call to her legal team. She said simply, "Initiate everything we discussed. I want full control by tomorrow morning." Over at Mantisai Hospital, Vanessa's labor was anything but serene. She was ill-prepared for the pain, screaming and cursing the nurses. Charles arrived in time to witness the final stages, sweat pouring down his temples. When the baby boy arrived, loud and healthy, Charles felt a dizzying mix of joy and dread. Here was his second son, the one he promised his mistress that she could name. As the nurse asked for the child's name, Vanessa beamed. "Ansel Giovanni Beaumont," she declared proudly. And Charles, though unsettled, echoed the name to the hospital staff, sealing it on the birth certificate. Despite the suffocating tension, a small part of him felt relief that the baby was safely born. But that relief didn't last long. As Charles stepped into the hallway to call Juliana, thinking he owed her at least a status update, his phone erupted with new notifications. Headlines from multiple news outlets blared. Millionaire Charles Beaumont's wife takes control of company. Pregnant wife of tech mobile files for emergency injunction. Beaumont innovations in turmoil after shock boardroom move. Charles's jaw dropped. He scrolled frantically, seeing references to legal documents filed at daybreak. Juliana had exercised a rarely used clause in their prenuptial agreement, which stated that in the event of infidelity resulting in the conception of a child, the faithful spouse could claim a controlling share of jointly held assets. This clause, initially laughed off as old-fashioned, had now been activated with brutal precision. She had also garnered the support of key board members who were outraged by the potential scandal's impact on the company's reputation. In the span of hours, Juliana had become the legal majority stakeholder of Beaumont Innovations. She had effectively dethroned Charles. No longer did he have unilateral authority. Decisions now required her approval or that of her proxies. All while she cradled their newborn son at home. Charles felt the hospital walls close in, his breathing unsteady. Vanessa was calling him back into the room, oblivious to the corporate earthquake shaking his foundation. He stumbled back to face her. She saw the panic in his eyes, the news stories flashing on his phone. "Charles, what the hell is going on?" she demanded. The child in her arms wailed as if echoing the chaos. Charles inhaled shakily, realizing with sinking dread that he was on the brink of losing everything, and there was no one to blame but himself. Juliana's takeover sent shockwaves through the financial world. Business analysts reported that in one swift move, the once silent partner of Beaumont Innovations had claimed the kingdom, leaving Charles with a diminished role. Some insiders admired Juliana's audacity. Others labeled it a cold, calculated betrayal. Yet those who knew the whole story recognized the reason. Charles had broken vows in the most humiliating manner possible, and Juliana had simply wielded the legal weapons already at her disposal. Within days, reporters swarmed the Beaumont penthouse, hoping to catch a glimpse of the newly empowered wife or glean some statement about her motivations. Juliana remained inside with her newborn son, ignoring the media circus. She released a single statement through her lawyer confirming she had assumed majority control to protect the company and her family's interests. The statement was deliberately vague, neither confirming nor denying Charles's affair or the existence of the second child. Charles, stuck in a nightmare of his own making, tried to negotiate a meeting with Juliana. He pleaded through phone calls and texts, wanting to talk face to face. She refused. Instead, she had her attorney respond, instructing him to direct all communication about personal or business matters through legal channels. The blow was devastating. Their once intimate partnership, built on love and mutual ambition, had deteriorated into cold, adversarial positions. Meanwhile, Vanessa found herself without the outcome she dreamed of. Yes, she had Charles's illegitimate child and the sensational story of naming him Ansel Giovanni Beaumont. But the immediate windfall she hoped for disappeared in the shadow of Juliana's swift legal strike. With the company under Juliana's control, Charles no longer had unrestrained access to corporate funds. The hush money he'd set aside was in question, potentially subject to asset freezes pending legal reviews. Vanessa lashed out at Charles, accusing him of leading her on, promising her a glamorous future. He, in turn, was too overwhelmed by the crisis to soothe her tantrums. Tabloid journalists sniffed around, suspicious that Vanessa's baby might be Charles's. She attempted to drop veiled hints for a payday. But Juliana's legal team sent stern warnings to every major gossip publication, run unverified stories about the Beaumont family, and faced potential lawsuits. The tabloids, wary of litigation, waited. They needed hard evidence, DNA proof, or official statements. Vanessa considered selling a paternity test to them, but Charles refused to comply, and no reputable lab would release private results without both parents' consent. In a turn that no one predicted, the once flamboyant Vanessa was forced into relative obscurity. She had her son, but no direct path to the Beaumont fortune. Her attempts to push Charles into signing further documents or giving her a seat at Beaumont Innovations fell flat. He didn't have that power anymore. Desperate for a new angle, Vanessa tried contacting Juliana's legal team directly, proposing some kind of settlement in exchange for staying silent. Juliana, through her attorneys, didn't bite. Instead, she insisted that any arrangement involving a financial settlement would require strict confidentiality clauses, DNA testing, and an agreement that Vanessa relinquish any future claims against the Beaumont estate. It was the kind of ironclad deal that would not elevate Vanessa's status. It would simply shut her out of their lives entirely. For Charles, life was a daily spiral of humiliation. His board at Beaumont Innovations demanded explanations. Some wanted him ousted altogether, claiming that personal scandals undermined the company's integrity. Juliana, though newly in command, hesitated to fully remove Charles, perhaps because she recognized his talent, or perhaps out of lingering emotional ties. Instead, she demoted him to a subsidiary leadership role, one that removed him from the public eye. As weeks turned into months, Charles faced the bitter consequences of his choices. He was a father to two sons, one he could barely see, another who existed in a legal limbo. Juliana allowed him supervised visits with Robert, their legitimate child, but only under conditions that a nanny and a security detail were present. She said it was for the baby's safety, but Charles sensed it was also to underscore her dominance. Meanwhile, Vanessa's resentment grew. She had lost the glitz and the promise of a fairy tale ending. Ansel Giovanni, now a few months old, became a bargaining chip, an anchor she hoped would still reel in a piece of the Beaumont riches. But with each day that passed, the hope dimmed, replaced by bitterness that overshadowed whatever fleeting bond she thought she had with Charles. Just when Charles believed his life couldn't sink any lower, karma came knocking. The European cybersecurity firm that Beaumont Innovations had courted decided to partner with Caldwell Tech instead. The press labeled it the Beaumont collapse, a pun-laden scandal, referencing how Charles's personal crisis undermined his professional credibility. Stocks wavered, board confidence shook, and rumors spread that Juliana was quietly seeking a new CEO to manage day-to-day operations. Juliana, too, faced her own challenges. Being a new mother to Robert, while simultaneously running a major corporation, was no small feat. She hired an experienced team of executives, forging alliances with senior partners who respected her no-nonsense approach. She navigated investor calls, soothing concerns about the company's future. Despite her outward calm, exhaustion and heartbreak gnawed at her. Late at night, after the baby was asleep and the board meetings were done, she sometimes cried into her pillow, mourning the love she once had for Charles. One particularly stressful evening, she reviewed financial projections for the next quarter. Beaumont Innovations stood a chance of recovery if they launched a new suite of consulting services to expand into healthcare and education technology. But the pivot required stable leadership. Her phone buzzed with a text from Hannah. He's outside the building. Says he needs to talk to you. Juliana sighed. Charles was relentless, hoping for a reconciliation or at least a conversation about co-parenting. She debated ignoring him, but maternal exhaustion softened her resolve. She consented to see him in the lobby under security supervision. When she arrived, Charles looked haggard, eyes ringed with dark circles, hair unkempt, suit rumpled. For a moment, she felt a pang of compassion. Then she recalled his betrayal and steeled herself. Juliana, he began, voice cracking. I'm sorry. She held up a hand. Spare me. If you have something concrete to say about the baby or the company, speak. Otherwise, I have to get back to my child. He swallowed hard. I want to be a father to Robert. I've tried to see him. Your security is making it impossible. We need to figure out a real custody arrangement. Juliana's lips pressed thin. Charles, you're the reason we're in a legal war zone. You think I'm going to risk letting you and that woman anywhere near my son without safeguards? His voice rose, desperate. Vanessa has no interest in Robert. He's our child. Let me prove I can be responsible. I'll do anything, therapy, supervised visits, whatever you want. His eyes shone with genuine regret. I know I messed up, but he's my son. For a moment, Juliana's stoic facade wavered. She recalled the early days of their romance, the sincere vow in his eyes when he proposed. She inhaled slowly. I'll consult my legal team. If they see progress, we can adjust the visitation terms. She paused, then added, but don't for 1 second think I'll forgive you. This is for Robert's benefit, not yours. Charles nodded, tears welling up. He left without further argument, leaving Juliana drained. She returned upstairs, shoulders heavy with conflicting emotions. Compassion warred with fury, and she hated that a tiny sliver of her still cared about the father of her child. While Charles attempted to salvage his personal relationship with Robert, Vanessa launched one final, desperate attempt at fame. She arranged an interview with a minor online gossip channel, promising an explosive revelation about a baby in the Beaumont family. Yet, to her dismay, no major platform would pick it up. Juliana's legal threats loomed, and the public had grown weary of unsubstantiated rumors. Vanessa's interview garnered a smattering of online comments, calling her an attention seeker. Without proof of paternity, her story fizzled. The sting of karma didn't end there. Charles learned from an inside source that Caldwell Tech had used the scandal to sabotage Beaumont Innovations' merger. They had discreetly fed tabloids hints of Charles's double life, magnifying the crisis just enough to tarnish Beaumont's reputation without leaving Caldwell Tech's fingerprints. It was ruthless corporate maneuvering and, ironically, a strategy Charles might have employed himself in his more cutthroat days. Now he was on the receiving end. Broken financially and emotionally, Charles relocated to a modest apartment near Midtown. Stripped of his authority at the company he had built, shackled by obligations to two different women, and haunted by public scorn, he could only reflect on the decisions that led him here. Some nights he lay awake in bed, remembering how a single reckless choice letting a mistress name his baby had set off the chain reaction that upended his entire life. Months turned into a year. Beaumont Innovations, under Juliana's leadership, steadily regained its footing. The pivot to healthcare and education technology proved successful, and the board's faith in her grew. She was hailed by some as a savvy businesswoman who overcame marital scandal to steer the company toward a stable future. Meanwhile, Charles found small pockets of redemption in fatherhood. Juliana's legal team finally granted him structured visitation with Robert, allowing supervised playdates. At first, Robert hardly recognized him, but over time, the baby's bright eyes lit up at his father's presence. Charles's heart melted during those visits, spurring him to improve. He started therapy sessions, focusing on accountability and emotional regulation. Though he was far from absolved, these steps signaled genuine change. One afternoon, while Charles was playing with Robert in Juliana's penthouse under the watchful eye of a nanny, Juliana returned home unexpectedly early. She stood by the doorway, quietly observing Charles lifting their son into the air, hearing the child's delighted giggles. There was a tenderness in Charles's manner that tugged at her heart. Hesitantly, she joined them. Their first civil conversation in months revolved around Robert's feeding schedule, sleeping patterns, and toy preferences. It was mundane, but free of hostility. For the briefest moment, they felt like a functioning family, though the scars remained. Over in Vanessa's world, the veneer of glamour had fully peeled away. With no reliable income and no big media payday, she struggled to maintain her upscale apartment. She still posted sporadic selfies with Ansel Giovanni, who was now toddling about, but the online attention had dwindled to a trickle. Depressed and resentful, she reached out to Charles more frequently, demanding money for the child's expenses. Charles, reduced financially, had little to give beyond a modest sum. He insisted that a formal paternity test be done so Ansel could be recognized legally and provided for under structured terms. Vanessa agreed, smelling an opportunity for child support. The test results came back positive. As expected, Charles was indeed Ansel's father. This obligated him to monthly support payments, which he complied with through a court-ordered arrangement. Vanessa tried to push for more, but the court, witnessing Charles's precarious financial standing, limited the amount. Furious, she threatened to go public again, but by now, the scandal had lost its sizzle. Society had moved on. She was yesterday's news, and no tabloid was interested in rehashing an old drama, especially after Juliana's legal letters. In a twist of ironic justice, Vanessa was evicted from her lavish apartment due to unpaid rent. She relocated to a more modest neighborhood in Queens. The paparazzi never bothered to follow. Slowly, she realized that no big fortune or stardom was coming. The dream of being the famous mistress-turned-socialite disintegrated, replaced by the mundane reality of raising a child alone. As for Charles, he found a semblance of emotional release in his therapy sessions. He came to understand how his ambition, pride, and insecurity had fueled his downfall. He also recognized that on some level, he had been seeking validation from Vanessa, a fleeting rush that filled gaps in his marriage. Self-forgiveness proved the hardest step, but he labored toward it, determined to become a better man for his children. Surprisingly, he also made slow strides in rebuilding trust with Juliana, at least enough for them to co-parent effectively. She invited him to occasional dinners with Robert, albeit under the watchful presence of a nanny or Hannah. Their conversation stayed centered on the child or the business, never straying into romance or emotional vulnerability. Juliana's heart was guarded. She couldn't simply erase the betrayal. Still, a fragile peace formed between them, built on shared love for their son and a mutual desire to move forward. Meanwhile, the corporate world had mostly accepted Juliana as the new face of Beaumont Innovations. Rival companies looked at her accomplishments with renewed respect, and industry magazines featured her in interviews, praising her resilience. Those reading the subtext knew the impetus for her rise came from personal tragedy. But publicly, she kept her tone professional, focusing on the bright future of the firm. During one rare moment of introspection, Charles visited the grave of his parents, Irene and Henry Beaumont, in their sleepy hometown. Placing a bouquet of lilies on the modest headstone, he whispered apologies for tarnishing the family name. He vowed to rebuild, not for glory, but for his children. No more illusions, no more recklessness. Some might call it too late, but Charles clung to the hope that real change was possible, even if it came at the highest cost. In the end, the story of Charles Beaumont III became a cautionary tale among the Manhattan elite, whispered at cocktail parties and executive luncheons. It was a grim reminder of how pride and temptation could unravel a life meticulously built over decades. Wealth, status, and power didn't grant immunity to human folly. They only amplified the fallout. Juliana continued to flourish as the head of Beaumont Innovations. Over the next few years, the company expanded into emerging markets, focusing on medical tech solutions for underfunded hospitals and educational software for resource-poor schools. Her philanthropic vision meshed with her strategic acumen, earning her accolades in the media. For all her success, she maintained a measured, composed demeanor. While she never publicly bashed Charles, she made it clear she was the driving force behind Beaumont's second act. Charles found new purpose in smaller ventures. An old friend from college invited him to co-found a modest startup focused on virtual training programs for vocational schools. Though the operation paled in comparison to Beaumont Innovations, Charles found satisfaction in shaping something that served a genuine need. Therapy sessions became less frequent, replaced by fatherhood duties and the daily hustle of building a new business. His relationship with Robert improved, evolving from awkward supervised visits to weekend stays at Charles's Midtown apartment. Though he and Juliana weren't a couple in any traditional sense, they navigated co-parenting with civility, even sharing the occasional smile during handoffs. Ansel Giovanni Beaumont remained a point of tension. Charles paid child support and visited sporadically, but the child mostly lived with Vanessa. She taught Ansel to call Charles daddy, though the paternal bond was faint compared to what Charles had with Robert. The truth was, Charles felt uneasy around Vanessa, who never fully abandoned her manipulative tendencies. He remained wary, suspecting she would exploit any moment of weakness for personal gain. Still, for Ansel's sake, Charles tried to maintain minimal contact, ensuring the boy had some semblance of a father figure in his life. Karma had a long reach, though. Vanessa's finances remained tight. She drifted from one half-baked scheme to another, searching for a pathway to the affluent lifestyle she believed she deserved. She even contemplated writing a tell-all book, but publishers showed little interest without verifiable evidence or public appetite for another scandal. In time, she disappeared from the gossip radar, her star never rising beyond that fleeting moment of notoriety. For Juliana, the emotional scars lingered. Despite her outward strength, she wrestled with trust issues, uncertain if she could ever open her heart again. Yet watching Robert grow into a healthy, inquisitive toddler, witnessing his boundless curiosity and his playful spirit, reminded her that some blessings emerged even from disaster. She might never forget Charles's betrayal, but she could forge ahead, guided by a moral compass that never wavered. One crisp autumn day, Charles and Juliana took Robert for a walk in Central Park, a rare outing they agreed upon to give their son a sense of normalcy. The leaves, a kaleidoscope of gold and crimson, rustled underfoot. Robert giggled, running ahead to chase a pigeon. Charles and Juliana strolled behind, caught in a moment that felt, for an instant, almost like old times, two people sharing a private joke, united by a child's laughter. "Life's funny," Juliana remarked softly, watching Robert squeal in delight. "A few years ago, I wanted nothing more than to see you suffer. Now I just want our son to be happy." Charles nodded, his gaze following Robert. "I don't blame you for hating me then. I've hated myself more than you'll ever know. But I'm grateful you're letting me be in his life in this way." Juliana offered a faint, almost imperceptible smile. "I'm doing it for Robert. Remember that." They stood in comfortable silence for a moment, the tension that once choked them easing into something resembling acceptance, perhaps even a quiet understanding. The damage done was irreversible, etched into their pasts. Yet, the presence of hope, small but persistent, flickered between them. They found a pathway through the rubble, a route that allowed them to coexist, to co-parent, for the sake of an innocent child who deserved the best of them both. And perhaps, in the grand scheme of things, that was the best outcome possible, a testament to resilience and the enduring power of parental love. Far from the tabloid headlines and the corporate wars, the two children at the heart of this scandal, Robert Henry Beaumont and Ansel Giovanni Beaumont, lived their separate lives, each inheriting a complex legacy. The story served as an enduring monument to human frailty and resilience, illustrating how a single reckless choice could topple empires while also forging unexpected lines of strength. The ghosts of betrayal would never fully vanish, but love, in its fragile and ever-hopeful form, managed to carve out a foothold amidst the wreckage. Life can take us on dark, winding roads, exposing our deepest flaws while molding our most profound strengths. Charles Beaumont and Juliana Thompson had it all: wealth, power, and a flawless public image. Yet, one fateful mistake tore down their empire. In the end, both found themselves reshaping their identities, learning that true success goes beyond dollar signs. It demands accountability, empathy, and growth. Thank you for watching this real-life drama unfold. If you found value in this story of betrayal, legal battles, and ultimate redemption, please show your support. Like this video, share it with friends who love gripping, true-to-life tales, and subscribe to our channel for more stories that captivate and enlighten. Together, let's continue exploring the extraordinary lessons hidden within ordinary lives. Your support means everything, and we look forward to bringing you more riveting content soon.